supported, of at least giving some lip service to the idea of support for the opposition, the armed opposition to the Assad regime. And I think, truly speaking, I mean, it appears to me that the CIA have already given up on that, frankly. I think they have already admitted that this is a complete flop. This is not going anywhere. And after the collapse or the conquest of Aleppo by the Assad regime with the support of the Russians and the Shiite militias provided by Iran and Hezbollah, you know, the opposition clearly is in a much weaker position, and it would not be surprising if the CIA said this is no longer a viable policy. So I think it's a pretty safe ground in believing that Trump is not going to go in that direction at all, and that indeed he will try to forge some kind of cooperation with the Russians against ISIS in Syria, as well as in Iraq, which has already taken place. Now, of course, that's going to be somewhat complicated by the campaign of leaks, which has started earlier this month. Actually, it started in January, which has attempted to do two things. And I'm going to assert as a fact, because I think it's very well documented by the content and the sequence of events of the leaks themselves, that those leaks have had two objectives. The first one was to make it politically impossible for Trump to roll back the Cold War with Russia, which the Obama administration had embarked on since 2014. And the second purpose, I think it's pretty clear, would be to give a major boost to the effort to unseat the Trump administration, to impeach Trump. And in that, I think they've been very successful in both regards. I think they've created a political climate in which it would be very, very difficult for Trump to do what he apparently had in mind, to come up with some kind of policy formula which would be based on reducing tension in some way with Russia, and actually having a program of cooperation with Russia, particularly in the Middle East. Now, bear in mind that Obama actually went pretty far in that direction at the end of his administration on Syria. He agreed to the negotiating position which was taken by Secretary of State John Kerry with the Russian foreign minister on a ceasefire agreement in February, and then again, well, not in February so much as in September, which included a provision that involved setting up an institution that would, in which the United States and Russia would cooperate on ISIS, and perhaps on Al-Qaeda as well, in Syria. Now, the Pentagon was dead set against that. They were adamantly opposed to it, and this is to me an astonishing story. I mean, they were openly against it. They were campaigning in the media against it. They did not try to hide the fact that they were adamantly opposed. I can't think of another case where the Pentagon has been so openly willing to have the media be explicit about the fact that they were challenging this in the highest meetings of the administration. And I believe, on the basis of the hard documentary evidence, that the U.S. military attacked a Syrian unit or a few Syrian positions in September of last year, in order to sabotage that agreement so that there would not be any agreement, there would not be any carrying out of that agreement. They succeeded in doing that. The agreement broke down after the U.S. attacked the Syrian bases in eastern Syria. So I don't know if the Secretary of Defense knew that was going on. I don't know at what level that I would call it an act of insubordination against the President's policy. But certainly the head of the Central Command Air Forces was the decision maker who approved that strike. And it was no accident. I mean, that's what is clear from the investigation report, which has been published, a lot of redactions, but there's enough evidence in that to make it impossible to believe that that was a mistake. So that gives you an idea of just how far the Pentagon was willing to go, or at least some elements of the U.S. military, at least some elements of the U.S. military were willing to go to prevent that agreement with Russia from being carried out, obviously because they wanted to make sure that Russia as the enemy would not be compromised. That meme, that theme, that idea, Russia as the main enemy of the United States at this point, had to be remaining intact. That's how important it is to these institutions. Yes?
You clearly outlined how president after president has been pressured into war or escalation of war. And yet by design, our government is supposed to reserve powers of war, or at least to declare war with Congress for, very specific reasons. And I wondered what you would recommend to average American citizens to say this power needs to be taken back by the Congress as our representatives, that this should no longer happen.
Well, right on. Absolutely. I mean, that's ideally what should happen. That Congress should take back the war powers. But, as I'm sure you understand from your question, the reality has been for many decades that Congress has given up that war power. Congress did not declare war in Vietnam, did not declare war in Iraq, although there was a weasel-worded resolution. It didn't say we support war. It allowed Hillary Clinton to claim, oh, I didn't vote for war. So, I mean, what you have is a system that is constantly involved in dissembling, hiding the reality, and that makes it more difficult, if not impossible, to make the primary issue Congress taking back the war power. They already have it. They have the power to declare war. And what you're really asking for is Congress should pledge not to support any war that they didn't declare. And I think that substantively is what we have to have. We have to have an act of Congress that substantively enacts what you're talking about. And I will tell you that I've been thinking about what might constitute that act of Congress. What kind of legislation would substantively bring about the condition that you're talking about? I think the answer is a piece of legislation that establishes in law that it is the policy of the U.S. government that we will not intervene in the disputes between other countries or within other countries which do not involve an immediate threat to the security of the United States, which makes it illegal then to carry out interventions such as we've seen ever since 1950. And spell that out in further detail. What kinds of appropriations would be forbidden under the law? What kind of military plans would be forbidden? What kind of military bases would be forbidden, et cetera, et cetera. That is the kind of legislation that I could see becoming the basis for a citizens movement. And that is what I'm going to personally spend the rest of my life, well, hopefully not the rest of my life. I think we could do it in 4 or 5 years if we were smart enough to get that enacted. But it would require a very, very well thought through citizens movement supported by somebody with a lot of money.
I got one more question here. Yeah, this guy's had his hand up.
Yeah, well, thank you for speaking a lot of very interesting and important ideas. So first I was going to ask you to explain the war in Yugoslavia in the 90s, but then when you were talking about Afghanistan, a lot of other questions came up for me, like what about the U.S. creation of Al-Qaeda and the Mujahideen to attack Afghanistan in the early 80s and later to attack Libya and Syria? And what about the U.S. and elements within the U.S. and Israeli government perpetrating 9/11 to force the U.S. to attack Afghanistan and Iraq? Like it seems like they couldn't be ready in 3 weeks to attack Afghanistan. It had to be planned in advance.
Well, okay, I'll give you the short answer. I'm not a truther. I do not embrace most of the ideas that you just suggested. But I will say that it is important to understand the thing that you started with, the role that the CIA covert operation in Afghanistan in the 1980s played in putting us on the road that we are now, unfortunately, still basically struggling to, that's not the right way to put it. It's put us on the road that has led to these disastrous wars in the Middle East. Because, of course, it did, in fact, create the conditions in which bin Laden's people in Afghanistan interacted with themselves, with each other, and with bin Laden, gave bin Laden the idea, hey, we've got something here we should put on the road. And that was the beginning of Al-Qaeda. And that did indeed make it possible for all of the terrorism that has followed under Al-Qaeda. But, you know, I think one has to understand that could not have happened without the war in Iraq, which opened up the doors wide to Al-Qaeda to come into Iraq and establish for the first time a presence. Up to that time, they had been an infinitesimal, insignificant presence in an obscure corner of the country with no following. Instead, they became a very powerful part of the Sunni resistance to the U.S. and went on from there to set up, and you know, I don't know if you know this, but the people from Al-Qaeda in Iraq who organized ISIS, first time who laid out the blueprints for the organization of ISIS, did so in the U.S. military prison under the noses of their guards. Now, does that mean that the guards knew what they were doing? Of course not. They didn't have any. They had no notion what was going on. And again, I mean, I would emphasize that the logic, the dynamic that is at work, is not some obscure, group of conspirators in some shady back alley or some smoke-filled room coming up with the idea of creating Al-Qaeda and having all the terrorism that followed. It is in the interests of these organizations to do what happened, and despite the fact that the counterterrorism officials and CIA analysts from the very beginning, even before the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, they were saying, this is going to lead to a disastrous rise in terrorism in the Middle East. And they went ahead anyway, of course, and never looked back. The real problem is that those institutions, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Pentagon, the CIA, their institutional interests would not abide any reversal of the commitment to the war in Iraq, even though they knew perfectly well what the consequences were. They knew perfectly well that this was giving Al-Qaeda this huge boost throughout the Middle East. It was the recruitment bonanza of the entire history of Al-Qaeda. This was the beginning of the huge increase in recruitment. It was well known, it was well understood. It was in CIA official assessments over and over again. No response whatsoever. No response whatsoever. No turning back. And you know, that to me, that's the real story. Not a 9/11 conspiracy.
But if the U.S. is against Al-Qaeda, then why didn't they support Syria and Libya against Al-Qaeda instead of trying to overthrow those countries?
For the reasons I've just stated, because okay, I'm sorry, I didn't spell it out, but I will. It's a good question. It's a good question. I'm sorry. I should explain in more depth. Two levels. The immediate institutional level of the CIA being that they have an interest in the covert operation in Syria. The operations directorate of the CIA was invested with that. And so they continue to put pressure on Obama to do more than he was willing to do, than he wanted to do. At a deeper level, the problem was, I think this is more fundamental and larger part of the problem. Obama went along with this even though, again, he knew it was wrong. He knew it was a big mistake. He said so. He said, I'm afraid this is going to repeat the mistake we made in Afghanistan. Even Hillary Clinton quotes that in her memoirs, that was Obama's viewpoint. And he was against having a covert operation to arm the opposition, but he went along with it. Why did he do it? Because America's allies in the Middle East, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, were insisting that it was time now to support an armed opposition. He was not willing to say no to that. And there's a reason intermediary to that. There's an intermediary layer of it, which is that the national security state, the permanent war state, meaning the Pentagon, the armed services, the CIA, and the NSA, all would refuse to go along with the policy of not supporting our Sunni allies in the Middle East. Why? Because every one of those institutions has deep ties with Saudi Arabia. Deep ties with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey. Military bases, all three of those countries control military bases that this complex regards as extremely important. They don't want to give them up. Sweetheart deals, lucrative deals between the military, between the Pentagon and the Saudis for selling arms. The CIA and the NSA sell their intelligence services to the Saudis for a lot of money, which helps to, they don't have to show it in their budget. It's extra budgetary money. So they're not going to give up those interests. That's too big. That's why we have done what we did in Syria. It's not a conspiracy because they want to use Al-Qaeda to wreck everybody in the Middle East. It's much more mundane.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I live with it every hour of the day,
So he does that kind of research on just those Iran deals,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. If we have our
I mean, there was some
The
point where
opposition
if we do the right
voting.
thing, there's the right kind of
whatever he was like, this is the real reason.
4 or 5 years.
Oh yeah, it's like
But that's like
That's-
random, like once I like started reading really fast, and then,
yeah, literally.
yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to form a president. Similar to yours.
Yeah, real reason. I
How
kind of want to ask something
how
else.
It's too big to handle.
out of the
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what I asked, but I just I don't know, like, where's it,
Private industry,
you know what I mean, like, is there,
politicians are.
I
Well,
just
and
wonder if
of
it's
course,
like,
the
it's
end of the
just
draft
like,
is
having like.
Yeah, he's selling those for.
This is our biggest position. Biggest position. On the other hand,
Yeah,
tonight,
Because you know how he has like
yeah, tonight,
these companies,
tonight I'm going to talk
doesn't he
about,
have like,
there are,
doesn't
of
he have
course,
financial interests in one that he didn't
Yes.
ban? And
Yeah. I mean, like, well, so much. And that is intentionally.
And failed war. Still goes forward, goes forward.
Was that Mike Marzetti? Was that Washington?
I didn't pick that up.
Oh, it was at the beginning. We're talking about, it was a book he had liked. And sort of was talking about Secret America.
Yeah, ask him what the title is. He's a little. See it is.
Trump / Bernie phenomenon, okay? It was social media, So I want to pull together people who know how that happened, who can do it again for a different cause. And I believe it can work. Because there's dry tinder out there. There's dry tinder. We are back to where
Thank
we
you,
were
sir.
after Vietnam in terms of people's not being
You're trying to stay well.
Okay.
Oh,
No, it's
okay.
true, there's not, this is.
You take care.
Well, so
Glad to hear that the operation went well.
Give me
That's right, another one of your 9 lives.
Well, I was actually going to start my talk tonight with Attorney Koski.